our sub-counties. CS, I believe that the law doesn't stop you, because essentially the argument you're making is that you cannot disclose that information, and I believe that could also be the clever way on how you're trying to justify and say that you can't give us the names of the people who have gotten jobs ever since the government started signing the bilateral agreements. CS, we want that list. The reason why we want that list is that Kenyans, we have a bad habit. When we are given an opportunity to look for things which we call Kenyan, we only share them with our tribes and our friends, our cousins and our families. That list is the one which will show the equity, the fairness and the distribution of those jobs that you are giving out there. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, can you please promise this House that you're going to provide that list, and it will be a genuine list, and it will be an honest list? Number two, and Madam Chair, I really got confused because when I came in, there was a wonderful question that Senator Kavindu had raised, and this had to do with the Kenyans, because this is a matter she's held personally. The question I wanted to ask the CS is that, does he think, and I could suggest that, Your Honorable, you could engage with CS, with the Chief Secretary Musalia. Do you think, or don't you think, that as we sit in this House, that it is actually us as a country, we are busy complaining how the American government has never compensated Kenyans who are injured from the bomb blast which took place. But the reality is, it is our responsibility as leadership in this country to make sure that this House can pronounce itself so that even when the Americans are busy in court trying to figure out this issue, don't you think that as Kenyans we need to compensate our people who died and the people who actually were blown up during that bomb blast which took place in Nairobi? I think, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, we've been extremely irresponsible and casual the way we handle this matter. And lastly, I want to ask the CS, I hope he can...
Honorable Senators, you are actually supposed to ask just one question.
Thank you. I will stand down, Madam Chair. Thank you so much.
CS?
Thank you very much, Senator Onyonka, for your questions. In terms of provision of information, we have with us in our offices the payroll. And because it is important, and I totally agree with you, we don't want to ghost people being paid. We want people to say, huyu mtu analipwa, atumfahamu ametoka wapi. I have no problem of any individual member of parliament in the National Assembly asking me, can you give me specific information, so that, because I can be able to give you that information, so that you can be able to double check and ensure that those people that have been listed are within your area, so that you can also help me also identify, maybe some have passed away and they're still being paid, others are moved to other counties and they're still being paid under the name of your county, etc., etc. The other question that you asked about, we don't have a problem giving the names of Kenyans who have gone overseas on these jobs. We have the list. So usually what happens that we dispatch them here. Our job is to get them the jobs. They go overseas, then we let diaspora now, because once they get into the plane and cross the Ethiopian border going north or Tanzania border going south, they become a diaspora issue, even as we follow up. But we are now keeping tabs to ensure we know where each Kenyan is and where they work, because any Kenyan who is in distress is important to us. And I can also ask my senior and brother Musalia Mudavadi, PCS, to provide that information. On the issue of our responsibility to also compensate, I think that's an issue that Parliament can engage in and bring it up as an issue, and so that it can also be budgeted for, and with proper research. So it can be budgeted for, and money is put aside for that form of compensation by the Kenyan government. But in the meantime, we are going to push for them to get their rights from the United States and other areas where they should be paid. I submit, Madam Speaker.
Senator Cherarke, your second supplementary question, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My final question to the CS. Bwana CS, there are ladies who have given birth in Saudi Arabia, popularly known as Kadamas, who have stranded children, and they cannot come back to the country because there is perception that it is child trafficking, yet DNA has been done to confirm that it belongs to them. What is the ministry doing to ensure that they are able, through the diaspora department, that they are able to come back home without having those restrictions from that country? I thank you, Madam Speaker.
CS.
Thank you very much. When I was in Saudi Arabia, I met families. I met a lot of single mothers with children born in Saudi Arabia. And I engaged the Saudi Arabian government, and they said that because of the issue of child trafficking, they cannot just allow a mother to just take a child and say, this is my child, and come home. Because they realize very quickly, a girl is coming home, another girl says, chukua huyu mtoto pelekea mama yangu. And the child never reaches, or it becomes like child trafficking program. Therefore, we agreed, and they have instituted a DNA system. So the mother undergoes a DNA with the child, and there's verification that this is actually your child. And then a permit is given for you to travel with that child and leave the country. Basically, they are protecting so that a mother doesn't wake up and say, my child is missing. And you look for that child, unakuta aliingia ndege na Mkenya ama Muganda ama another person from an African country, Nigeria, Tanzania, anywhere, na ameenda. And walisema na mtoto wao. So it's also protecting our children who are born in those countries, so that the mother knows that my child, hata akipatikana kwa barabara, hata toroshwa, apelekwe nchi ingine akauzwe huko, because a DNA will need to be done. So we worked on that, and now we have safe houses that are continuing being set up, so that when a mother is in distress, a child is in distress, there's a safe house where you can actually go and say, that is my child. That is, so there's an organized system to protect them. Finally, I'd like to say that, Madam Speaker, with your permission, I believe that the documents are already on your table that Senator Chirangai was asking about, that saying that you are not tabled. I think they have been found within the system over here. I submit. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator.
Madam Speaker, if I can answer that question that I overheard, is that...
he wants to know how many children have come back.
I will... yes, as I said, that is the forte of the State Department for Diaspora, which is under Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, because they are being processed overseas, and they are the ones with the records from the Ministry of Migration, Overseas and Foreign Affairs, so they'll be in a better place to be able to answer that question. Thank you.
Senator Onyonka, no, you can't, no. Was it a point of order or what? On what?
Been provided.
Senator Onyonka, I don't know how you would have a point of order on a list that we've not even discussed. Please, let's move on.
Madam Chair, the list has been tabled. Madam Chair, the list has been given, and that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
And the list doesn't have individuals, and it just has numbers, Madam. There is no information on this thing.
Senator Cherarke, do you want to just speak to the list quickly?
Madam Speaker, you know, when you table documents, you know, the Senate has the jurisdiction of High Court, as you are a senior counsel in this republic. The CS had said in answer that he had attached the list, but what he has done, he has given us numbers. We don't know who these are. He has child in this country, so can we get a detailed list of
Okay.
what my question required, Madam Speaker, and I'll be grateful. I thank you.
CS, we expect that you will submit the list as was expected in the question. So kindly ensure that that happens. Please confirm that you will do that. Okay. We are requesting that the list be provided in the proper format. A list is not just numbers. So we are requesting that that happens within the next 2 days, should be submitted. Can we now move on to the CS's next question by Senator Wakoli? Yeah. Senator Halwale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as you'll notice on your list there are a lot of interventions for people who want to ask further supplementary questions. Secondly, you have seen so far the answers provided are not adequate. I plead that you consider stepping the question down so that the minister can be given another opportunity to respond to these things. We have very serious matters on these bilateral agreements. Madam Speaker, Kenyans remember that African tribal chiefs allowed slave trade to thrive, and the reason was the people who are coming for our people wanted labor that was free. This time, they are looking for cheap labor. We want to interrogate these things, Madam Speaker.
Senator Halwale, you are prosecuting your point as you are speaking about procedure. There is nothing wrong with the procedure that we have. As Speaker, we manage the time. We have another question, and we have another CS in the waiting room with 8 questions. I beg that we consider that we need to do this. We cannot step down the question and assume that we just continue because of this question. But the next question is actually to the same CS. So you get opportunity in your supplementary to also prosecute the cases you wanted to prosecute, for those who will get the chance. Senator Wakoli, please.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I have a few questions to put across. One, could the Cabinet Secretary provide a status update on the payment of terminal dues to all former employees of the Pan-African Paper Mills Company Limited in Webuye, who were in employment at the time the company was placed under receivership in March 2009. Can I proceed with the other questions, Honorable Speaker, or one at a time?
The questions as you had sent to the
Number
Cabinet Secretary,
2,
please.
could the Cabinet Secretary explain the reasons for the delay in payment as well as the projected timelines for the same? And 3, what is the government doing to expedite payment of terminal benefits of the former staff? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
CS.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Mheshimiwa Senator David Wakoli, for your question. My response is as follows. The termination of employment contracts of employees on account of redundancy of this Pan Paper company happened on 6th of April 2009, during the time the company was under receivership. In 2016, the ownership of the company changed when it was acquired by the Rai Group. Upon reopening of the company, many of the employees who served under the previous management were hired by the new management to work in various capacities, and which included the locals, and where for both outsource and co-establishment got to a total of 479 employees. All the workers were terminated on account of redundancy by the receiver with effect from 6th of April 2009. They received payment as provided under Section 311 of the Companies Act 2009 Cap 486, and which constituted full payment of the preferential element of the claims against the company for any arrears of pay, holiday pay, or notice pay. For more information, there's an annexure that we have attached dated 6th of April 2009, paragraph 2 and 3. The State Department of Industry in 2021, using documents from the receiver manager, which is PricewaterhouseCoopers company, was able to recommend payment of 229 plus million as terminal benefits to former employees of Pan-African Paper Mills Company Limited. And that is also annexure 2. And also you can see there's attached a letter from the ministry in charge of trade. And so that's the first question. On the second question, whether the delay on payments, why have they been there, and the reason is as follows. The State Department for Industry, which was directed to pay, made a request for funds to the National Treasury in May 2021 and October 2023. In November 2023, just a year ago, the National Treasury requested the State Department for Industry to prioritize these funds in this new financial year and the next financial year in the sector working groups. However, due to the budget ceilings at the sector working group for financial year 2024-2025, the amount to be paid to the former employees could not be covered. That is also covered in Annex 3 of the documents provided to us to give to you. And that is where there's been a delay. So we're expecting that they'll be covered in the future, and maybe the Ministry of Trade can clarify further. The question number 3 was, what is the government doing to expedite payment of terminal benefits to the former staff? And the response is that the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, through the State Department of Industry, communicated to the National Treasury in December 2023, appealing for additional funds to enable them pay dues to former staff. And I want to say that, Senator Wakoli, this is a very good question, timely, because as a result of this question, this issue is now alive, and we've been able to talk to the Department of Trade, and so the file has moved up, and I believe they're working on it. They're working on it, and they are working with Treasury, so it has come up, so it is not forgotten. I submit, Madam Senator.
Senator Wakoli, you have 2 more supplementary questions. Do you want to ask them now, or do you want to give an opportunity to other members first? Or do you want to ask one now and one later?
But Chair, I can give members an opportunity to ask.
Is Senator Murango there? Senator Mbugua.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is related to question number 51, which the CS was addressing earlier. And the CS had told us that one of the roles of the ministry through the National Employment Authority is to facilitate employment and placement of job seekers internationally. In the spirit of promoting equity and fairness, can the CS clearly tell this House and the country these jobs the government, through His Excellency the President, the government is pursuing, whether they are being applied for, either through the government or through the agency, and the procedures to be applied, because the word out there is that some jobs are being gotten directly from the government and others through the agency. Can the CS clear that, please? Thank you.
Honorable members, actually the CS is supposed to be answering supplementaries in respect of this other question. I can see members had many questions on the earlier one. So I'll allow a quick response to that.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just very quickly, and it's also good for the country to know that the system works this way. There are jobs in many countries, but our people cannot work in those countries because we don't have bilateral labor agreement that Kenyans can work in those countries unless they're employed by a company and they go through a process. So the reason we sign BLAs, bilateral labor agreements, is for them to be able to say, okay, out of the jobs that we want people to come and get visas for, we are going to allow Kenyans to be part of that list. So if the jobs are 100,000, so you know Kenyans can compete within those 100,000, others will go to other countries, but now the door has been opened for Kenyans because the door is closed in many places where we can't go because there's no agreement between the countries. Then the jobs are sourced 2 ways. The main way is that governments in those countries are not the ones employing. It is companies. Companies work with agencies. So a company there will decide, I want to get so many skilled nurses to come and work for my hospital. They normally look for an employment agency there that now comes to source them in Kenya. Or they write to an agency in Kenya and ask them whether the jobs can be, where they can get those jobs. And they get what are called demand. They are called demand letters. We say, we've got 500 nursing opportunities, and it's given to this company. And then the company says to NEA, to us, that we've received this order. That's number one. So normally you let the employment agencies do their work. They're the ones who know how to do the interviewing processes, the identification, the follow-up with the police for documents. That's their work. It's not the job of the government to handhold people. Number two, they are what are called government-to-government job, where the government says, as a government, we want to employ for a government institute Kenyans, and we ask the government to seek. So the Ministry of Labor now runs advertisements and welcomes those who are employing the government agency in that country to come here, and we provide for them, the Kenyans, to be interviewed by them. So that becomes a government-to-government job placement. But those are few and in between. Majority prefer to go through agencies because that's a style that is used all over the world. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Kio.
Give me the mic. Thank you. So, Madam Speaker, before I ask my supplementary, then I would seek your guidance on how to proceed, because
It's on the earlier one.
Yes, mine is on the earlier one.
Honorable Senators, I'll allow one question since it's the same CS, and that seems to be, most of the members' questions seem to be around that.
Right.
One short question.
Thank you. I will try to make it short. So, Bwana CS, thanks for coming, and thanks for your responses to the questions by members. Through you, Madam Speaker, I want to make reference to the response that the CS gave us when we asked about the real numbers and the real people that have benefited from these jobs. Madam Speaker, the caliber of people that are getting these jobs, especially to the Middle East, and I know, Madam Speaker, you must have been at the airport at some point, you see the traffic of young people, going to the Middle East for these jobs. They're the kind of people that you would refer to the internet to find out what is required and expected of them. I'm just wondering whether there is no policy document, a government policy document regulating the placement of our young people in jobs outside the country, whether they go there privately or through government arrangements. Isn't there a policy document? In the same manner that a private school in Kenya will be regulated by the same policy that regulates public schools in Kenya. Is there a policy document that regulates the work environment for our people outside this country? I thank you, Madam Speaker.
CS.
Madam Speaker, job migration has been occurring in our countries from the days of the JF Kennedy airlifts. And Kenyans are free to wake up today, go to internet, and see there's an aeronautical job for an engineer at NASA, and apply while they're in Kenya. And they are interviewed and they get the job, and they're able to leave and go outside the country to work. Normally, we ask Kenyans to let us know when they go overseas, they go as diaspora. Some go to work, others go as students, finish studying, and they work. We cannot start telling Kenyans that you have to tell us exactly where you are going every time you go to the airport, and demanding invasion of their rights. Well, that is true, though. I think that, and I agree with a good senator from Kitui, that it is important to have a good policy. And this policy has to be anchored in law. Currently, we have a labor migration bill that is alive, and it is in the last stages. And within the bill, there are regulations and directions of how we need to handle people going overseas to work. The sourcing of the jobs, the creation of a data bank so that we know as they go overseas, and everything that is being done. I have gone a step further with the National Employment Agency. We are now requiring that any Kenyan hired through our agencies, and which are the majority, that those Kenyans have to get a letter from my ministry which clears them. And the letter says, we have looked at everything, the documents are okay, and we have looked at this agency, this is okay, and we have created a letter. And that letter, we are now tying in our networks. I'm trying to find the right word. We are using our system, and we are matching it with the immigration system, so that as you leave the country, once we give you that letter, we ensure that your details are captured in the immigration system. So as you leave the country, when you present your passport and they scan it, immediately it comes up there to show that this person is actually going away for employment. So that we know, because some get the demand, they get the letters and they don't leave the country, they change their minds. They get better jobs in the country, or they decide otherwise, so that we'll know exactly who is leaving the country, their full names and where they are going, because the ticket details will be right there, so that we capture it, so we don't have to follow up. And then that information is given to diaspora, so even as they arrive to a particular country, the embassies know we have the following person coming to this country and coming to this city to work here, because we are interlinking the systems. And so that